They say love blinds us to the truth. But what happens when the truth is so bitter that it poisons everything you believed about the person you've loved the longest? I never thought my own flesh and blood would look at me and see nothing but a dollar sign, until the day I caught him slipping something into my wine. This is my story of betrayal, survival, and the most painful lesson I've ever learned. Sometimes the monster isn't hiding under your bed. He's sitting across your dinner table. If you're watching this, subscribe now and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. My name is Margaret Wilson, and this is how I discovered the bitter truth. The roast was perfectly done, but I couldn't enjoy a single bite. Not with Jason staring at me like that, with a tenderness I hadn't seen in years. Something was wrong. "Mom, you look better than last time," he said, refilling my water glass without being asked. My son, who had forgotten my birthday 3 years running, was suddenly Mr. Attentive. I studied his face across my dining table. At 52, Jason still had Henry's strong jawline, but none of my late husband's integrity. The track marks on his arms had faded, but the damage was done, to his body, to our relationship, to my retirement savings that had bailed him out of trouble more times than I could count. "I've been taking better care of myself," I replied carefully. "How's the job search going?" His eyes lit up. "That's actually why I came today. I got a position at Guardian Shield Insurance. Great benefits, solid salary." I wanted to believe him. God knows I wanted to. 10 years after Henry's death, I was still trying to fix our son. "That's wonderful," I said, feeling hope flutter dangerously in my chest. "Is it commission-based or—" "Salary plus bonuses," he interjected. "Mom, I'm clean now. 6 months, no slip-ups." The declaration hung in the air between us. I'd heard it before. The same promise, different year, but something in me still reached for it, like a drowning woman grasping at anything that floats. "I'm proud of you," I said, the words feeling rusty in my mouth. After dessert, I was gathering plates when I heard Jason's voice from the porch, urgent and low. I moved closer to the window, dish rag in hand. "I'll get the money, just need more time," he hissed into his phone. "The house is worth at least 300 grand, and there'll be the insurance too." My hands froze mid-wipe. The house, my house, that Henry and I had scrimped and saved for 40 years to pay off. When he came back inside, his smile was too wide. "Work stuff," he said before I could ask. "These clients can be demanding." He kissed my cheek goodbye, and I noticed his hands were trembling. Not the withdrawal tremors I'd learned to recognize years ago. Something different. Something worse. After his car disappeared down the street, I walked slowly to my bedroom and opened the bottom drawer of my dresser. Under a stack of Henry's old sweaters lay an envelope with $42,000 in cash, my emergency fund that not even Jason knew about. "You were right, Henry," I whispered to the empty room, touching the wedding band I still wore. "He hasn't changed." What I didn't know then was that I was already running out of time, and that our son wasn't just coming for my house, he was coming for my life. The chocolate box had a gold ribbon. The wine was my favorite Merlot. The flowers, daisies, filled my kitchen with a cheerfulness that felt increasingly at odds with the knot in my stomach. "You shouldn't have," I told Jason as he arranged the wine glasses on my coffee table. 3 visits in 2 weeks, a record. "Nothing's too good for my mom," he replied, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. The doorbell rang. It was Amanda, my niece, followed by my old friends Doris and Walter from church. Jason had organized a surprise birthday gathering, something he'd never done before. "Happy birthday, Aunt Maggie," Amanda said, hugging me tight. At 38, she looked so much like my brother Thomas, it made my heart ache. "Everyone," Jason announced, raising his glass, "to Mom's amazing 75 years. I blinked. "I'm 87, Jason." The room went quiet. Jason laughed too loudly. "See what I mean? Mom's been forgetting things. Last week she thought Reagan was still president." I had said no such thing. I began. "Don't worry about it, Mom," Jason cut in, patting my hand like I was a confused child. "We all get a little mixed up, sometimes." Throughout dinner, Jason dominated the conversation, interrupting me whenever I tried to speak. When I mentioned selling some jewelry to fund the New England trip I'd always dreamed of, he jumped in. "Don't worry about Mom's finances," he told everyone. "I'm handling all that now. She doesn't have the capacity anymore." Amanda's eyebrows shot up, but she said nothing. Later, I went to the bathroom and returned to find Jason at my desk, photographing my bank statements with his phone. "What are you doing?" I asked. He didn't even startle. "Just helping organize your papers, Mom. You've let things get pretty chaotic." After everyone left, I sat on my bed clutching Henry's photograph. "He was charming tonight," I whispered to the image of my late husband, "just like when he wanted money for drugs." Henry had always seen through Jason's manipulations. "He'll never change until he faces real consequences," he'd told me countless times. Tears slipped down my cheeks as I remembered how I'd defended our son, how I'd emptied our savings to bail him out of trouble, how I'd believed every promise of reform. I was still crying when I heard the floorboards creak outside my bedroom. Through the crack in my door, I saw Jason's shadow pause, listening. I quickly lay down and pretended to sleep. Whatever game he was playing, I was now certain of one thing. My son wasn't here to help me, and nobody was going to believe an old woman over her devoted son who was just looking out for her well-being. I was on my own. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Wilson, but your son specifically requested that we redirect your mail to his address," the postal worker explained, not meeting my eyes. "He said it would help you with your condition." My condition. As if being elderly was a disease. I thanked him and walked slowly to the bus stop, my mind racing faster than it had in years. 3 weeks without mail meant 3 weeks without bank statements or bills. What was Jason doing with them? The bank was 8 blocks away. By the time I pushed through its heavy glass doors, my hip was aching something fierce, but determination pushed me forward. "Mrs. Wilson!" The bank manager, Mr. Hoffman, looked up in surprise. "We've missed seeing you." Mr. Hoffman had known Henry and me for decades. When I explained my concerns, his professional smile faded. "There have been some unusual account inquiries," he admitted, lowering his voice. "Your son came in last week asking about home equity loans with your house as collateral. He also inquired about getting power of attorney." My blood ran cold. "Did he withdraw anything?" "He tried to access your emergency savings account. We denied it without your signature. Thank God for small mercies." As I waited for the bus home, my phone rang. It was Dr. Richards, my physician of 20 years. "Margaret, I was concerned when you missed our follow-up about those concerning test results," he said. "What test results?" My voice sounded distant to my own ears. A pause. "The ones I discussed with Jason last month. He said he'd bring you in right away." "I never heard about any results," I said, gripping the phone tighter. Dr. Richards cleared his throat uncomfortably. "He said you were too confused to handle medical information yourself. He's been quite persistent about your health lately, even requested copies of your full medical records." Something cracked inside me. Not fear this time, anger, white-hot and clarifying. "Tell me exactly what my son has been asking about," I said. When I hung up, my hands were shaking. Jason had been asking about my heart condition, specifically how fragile it might be, whether certain medications might be too much for my system, how sudden heart failure might present in someone already in decline. On the bus ride home, I looked at my reflection in the window. An old woman stared back, white-haired and lined. Was this what Jason saw? Not his mother, but an obstacle to be removed? I remembered the phone call I'd overheard, the house and the insurance. Now I understood what insurance he meant. Not his new job, my life insurance. A memory surfaced. Jason as a little boy, crying over a dead bird in our yard. How tenderly he had buried it. How he had asked if the bird had a family who would miss it. What had happened to that child? The bus stopped a block from my house. As I walked home, I saw Jason's car in my driveway, and beside it, an unfamiliar, official-looking vehicle. Through my front window, I could see Jason talking to a woman in a suit who was taking notes. He was gesturing around my living room, pointing out things I couldn't see. I straightened my spine, ignoring the pain in my hip. Whatever he was planning, I would not go quietly. "Mrs. Wilson, I'm Karen Patterson from Adult Protective Services," the woman said when I entered my own living room. "We received a report about possible self-neglect." Jason hovered nearby, his face a mask of concern. "Mom, I was just explaining to Ms. Patterson about finding expired medication in your cabinet." I set down my purse carefully. "How interesting that you found something I didn't know was there." The social worker glanced between us. "Mrs. Wilson, may I look around your home?" "Of course," I said calmly. "Jason, would you make us some tea?" Once he was in the kitchen, I leaned closer to Ms. Patterson. "When exactly was this report filed?" She checked her notes. "Yesterday at 3:15 p.m. The caller requested anonymity, but scheduled this visit for today at 2 psych. The same time Jason had texted asking if I would be home. For the next hour, Jason led Ms. Patterson through a guided tour of my supposed incompetence. The expired food in the refrigerator that he'd brought weeks ago, the unpaid bills he'd been intercepting, the disorganized medication that had been perfectly arranged until he rearranged it while I was in the bathroom. "Mom's been forgetting to eat," he said, opening cupboards. "And these stairs are a death trap waiting to happen." I smiled pleasantly, saying little. Let him think I was passive. After Ms. Patterson left, promising to return for a formal assessment in 2 weeks, Jason put his arm around me. "It's for your own good, Mom," he said. "Have you thought more about selling the house? There are some nice assisted living facilities that would take the burden off you." "I'll think about it," I lied. That night, after he left, I searched his jacket pockets before hanging it up, a trick Henry had taught me during Jason's teenage years when we were checking for drugs. Inside the inner pocket, I found a business card for Summit Real Estate, with my address written on the back and 285 to 310K circled. Beneath it, a note: "Can close in 45 days after placement." My hands trembled as I turned the card over. On the back was a receipt for a payment to someone named Mick Donovan, with a final note that turned my blood to ice. Last deadline, 60 days, 250K total or consequences. I replaced the card exactly as I'd found it and returned the jacket to the coat rack. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I knelt by my bed to pray. "Henry," I whispered, "I need you now. Tell me what to do." No divine answer came, but as I struggled to my feet, I caught sight of my reflection in the mirror. Behind the wrinkles and white hair, I saw something I'd forgotten was there. The steel that had helped me survive poverty, war, Henry's death, and decades of Jason's addiction. That night, I called the only person I could still trust. My old friend Eleanor from church had been a nurse for 40 years before retiring. If anyone would believe me, she would. "Eleanor? It's Maggie," I said when she answered. "I need help. I think my son is trying to kill me." The words hung in the darkness of my bedroom, terrible and true. "You look lovely tonight, Mom," Jason said, pouring the dark red wine into my glass. "That blue brings out your eyes." I smiled, though my heart was hammering in my chest. This was our third special dinner this month, each one featuring wine that Jason insisted on pouring himself. "I've been thinking about your future," he continued, watching me intently as I lifted the glass. "I'm looking into some insurance options, just for peace of mind." "Insurance?" I took a small sip and forced myself not to grimace at the bitter aftertaste. "What kind?" "Nothing to worry about," he waved dismissively. "Just coverage for potential medical expenses. You know, being prepared is part of my job now." His eyes never left my glass. I pretended to take another sip. "How's your heart been lately?" he asked casually. "Still taking the medication Dr. Richards prescribed?" "Every day," I lied. I'd stopped taking anything Jason handled weeks ago. "Good, good. And those dizzy spells you mentioned?" I'd mentioned no such thing. "Oh, they come and go," I said vaguely, discreetly emptying half my wine into the potted plant beside me when he turned to serve the pasta. Jason's face tightened when he noticed my still full glass. "Not enjoying the wine? It's expensive stuff." "It's lovely," I assured him. "Just taking it slow. My tolerance isn't what it used to be." He relaxed slightly. "Well, here's to your health." He raised his glass in a toast. "To health," I echoed, pretending to sip again. After dinner, I walked him to the door, playing the part of the slightly confused but appreciative mother. When his car finally pulled away, I rushed back to the potted plant. The leaves were already turning brown at the edges. With shaking hands, I carefully poured the remaining wine into an empty prescription bottle and sealed it tight. Then I hid it in the back of my closet, behind Henry's old boots. Standing in my silent kitchen, I caught my reflection in the window. For a moment, I barely recognized myself, this frightened old woman with trembling hands and shadows under her eyes. But then I straightened my shoulders, the way Henry always told me to when times got tough. "You will not break me," I whispered to Jason's ghost in the empty room. "Not after everything I've survived." I'd been a fool, thinking maternal love could overcome addiction and greed. Now I needed to be something else entirely. I needed to be a survivor. That night, I called Eleanor again. "It's happening," I told her. "He's putting something in my drinks. I'm coming over tomorrow," she said firmly. "And I'm bringing someone who can help." As I hung up, I noticed a text from Jason. "Hope you're feeling well after dinner. Might have been too much wine for you. Sleep tight, Mom." I set the phone down and stared at the moon through my bedroom window. It was waning, half of its face hidden in shadow. Like the truth about my son, like the mother I now needed to become. "Don't touch anything," Tyler whispered, glancing nervously at the windows. "If he's as paranoid as you say, he might notice." Eleanor's 19-year-old grandson looked nothing like a hero, all gangly limbs and acne scars. But to me, he was a knight in shining armor. As a part-time security system installer and IT student, he'd brought tiny cameras that looked like nothing more than black buttons. "This one goes in the bookshelf," he said, positioning a camera between my collection of mystery novels, "and this one in the kitchen light fixture. They'll stream to a secure server at Grandma's house." Eleanor stood watch by the window. "Barbara will be here soon," she said. "She's bringing the paperwork." Barbara Reynolds, Eleanor's friend and a retired attorney who specialized in elder law, had agreed to help me pro bono. "I've seen this before," she'd told me over the phone, "and I refused to see it happen again." As Tyler installed the last camera, I felt a strange calm settle over me. For weeks I'd been a victim, frightened, reactive, alone. Now I had allies. A plan. "Done," Tyler announced. "I've set up the feeds to a password-protected site. Grandma and I will monitor them 24/7. The doorbell rang. Barbara Reynolds was a compact woman with silver hair cut in a sharp bob and eyes that missed nothing. "Let's get to work," she said, spreading documents across my dining table. "First, we're creating a new will with ironclad provisions. Then we're filing for a restraining order based on the wine sample you saved." "Will anyone believe me?" I asked, voicing my deepest fear. "Against my own son?" Barbara's eyes flashed. "With the evidence we're gathering? Absolutely." Eleanor squeezed my hand. "We also need a code system for emergencies. If Jason shows up unexpectedly or you feel threatened, send me a text about my knitting pattern. That's our signal to call the police." We worked until sunset, creating what Barbara called a safety fortress: legal, physical, and digital protection. Tyler installed a small safe in my basement where I could store evidence. Barbara helped me open a new bank account at a different bank. Eleanor prepared emergency bags to keep at her house in case I needed to leave quickly. As they were leaving, Barbara paused at the door. "Margaret, are you certain you want to go through with this? It won't be easy." I thought of all the times I'd made excuses for Jason, the money I'd given him, the lies I'd believed, the way Henry had looked at me with disappointment in his eyes when I bailed our son out yet again. "I'm certain," I said, my voice stronger than it had been in years. "He's left me no choice." That night, alone in my house that no longer felt like the safe haven it once was, I started a coded diary, as Barbara had suggested. Not about my fear or pain, but about my plan, my resistance. I wrote about the mother I had been, soft, forgiving, blind, and the woman I needed to become, clear-eyed, strategic, unafraid. As I wrote, I felt something shifting inside me. The helpless victim was receding, and in her place stood a woman I'd almost forgotten existed, the one who had worked 2 jobs after Henry's first heart attack, who had faced down bill collectors during the recession, who had buried her husband and kept going. I closed the diary and locked it in the new safe, along with the wine sample and a burner phone Eleanor had given me. Through my bedroom window, I could see Jason's car parked down the street. Watching, waiting, let him watch. The game had changed, and he didn't even know it yet. "Sleeping like a baby," Jason's voice came through clearly on the camera feed Eleanor had pulled up on her tablet. He was in my kitchen, speaking into his phone while rifling through my medicine cabinet. "Another week, maybe 2, and it'll look like natural causes. Heart failure in her sleep." Eleanor's face was grim as we sat in her living room, watching my son plot my death. Tyler hovered nearby, recording everything. "We need to check what he's doing with your medication," Barbara said, making notes. "Can you get a sample of the pills he's replaced?" I nodded. "I've been palming them for days, pretending to swallow." Over the next week, our evidence mounted. Jason searching my dresser drawers for financial documents. Jason on the phone with someone discussing getting the old lady's signature on the transfer papers before it's too late. Jason replacing my heart medication with identical-looking pills that, when tested by Amanda at the hospital lab, turned out to contain traces of substances that would gradually weaken my heart. He's been researching untraceable poisons, Tyler reported, showing us the browser history from my computer, and how to make heart attacks look natural in elderly patients. The most damning evidence came when Barbara's contacts in the insurance industry discovered that Jason had taken out a life insurance policy on me worth $250,000 through a shady company called Guardian Shield Insurance. He'd used forged documents showing me as 75 instead of 87 and bribed an agent named Frank Simmons to bypass the medical exam requirement. The policy has a 2-month waiting period before it pays out, Barbara explained, which explains his timeline. And look at the beneficiary address. It matches this Mick Donovan character's. A loan shark, Tyler confirmed, having traced the name through public records. Jason owes him big time, judging by the payment slips you found. On the day Miss Patterson returned for her follow-up assessment, I was ready. Following Barbara's coaching, I presented myself as organized, lucid, and perfectly capable. I showed her my medication management system, my balanced checkbook, and the healthy meals in my refrigerator. Mrs. Wilson, frankly, I'm confused, she admitted. The concerns reported to us don't match what I'm seeing at all. Perhaps there was a misunderstanding, I suggested mildly. Or perhaps someone has reasons to want me to appear incapable. When Jason arrived unexpectedly during the assessment, his face darkened, seeing Ms. Patterson and me chatting comfortably over tea. Mom has good days and bad days, he interjected, shooting me a warning look. Today must be a good day. After Ms. Patterson left, having found no grounds for intervention, Jason's facade cracked. What was that about? He demanded. You hardly recognized me last week, and now you're Martha Stewart? I blinked innocently. I'm just following my routine, Jason. Did you need something? His eyes narrowed. Actually, I brought some papers for you to sign, just some routine financial matters. He pulled out transfer documents from my house and a new will naming him as sole beneficiary. I'll look these over later, I said, setting them aside. My eyes get tired in the evening. Mom, his voice hardened. These need to be signed now, for your protection. I clasped my hands to hide their trembling. I'm quite tired, son. Perhaps tomorrow? Something flashed in his eyes, rage, quickly masked by concern. Of course, Mom. Rest well. I'll come back in the morning. After he left, I called Barbara immediately. He's getting impatient. The documents are here. He wants the house transferred tomorrow. Perfect, Barbara replied. Now we move to phase 2. That night, I couldn't sleep. The cameras caught Jason outside, sitting in his car, watching my darkened windows, waiting for his inheritance. Little did he know, I had just removed him from my will entirely. Mom! Jason's voice boomed through my house. Why aren't you answering your phone? I've been calling all morning. I was sitting at my kitchen table, calmly eating toast, when he burst in. 3 days had passed since his last visit, and his composure was visibly cracking. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and his hands twitched at his sides. Good morning, Jason, I said evenly. I must have been in the garden. Such a lovely day. The garden? He glanced at the window where rain streaked the glass. It's pouring outside. I blinked owlishly. Is it? I could have sworn. This was the new strategy Barbara had suggested. Selective confusion. Act disoriented about harmless things, making Jason believe his plan was working while remaining crystal clear about anything legally binding. Never mind, he muttered. Did you look at those papers I left? What papers? I asked innocently. His jaw tightened. The house transfer. The new will, remember? I frowned. Oh, those papers. I gave them to my financial advisor to review. Your what? Jason's voice rose an octave. Mr. Hoffman at the bank, I said. He's always helped me with important decisions. Henry trusted him. Jason's face flushed. You had no right. Those were private family matters. I met his gaze steadily. It's my house, Jason. My life. My decision. Something changed in his expression then. The mask of concern slipping to reveal the cold calculation beneath. You know, Mom, he said, his voice dangerously soft, I'm worried about your mental state. 1 minute you're confused about the weather, the next you're making financial decisions. I may get confused about small things. I replied. But I know exactly what belongs to me. He slammed his hand on the table, making me jump. Nothing belongs to you. Dad left it to both of us, and I've been taking care of you for years. The lie was so blatant it almost made me laugh. Henry had left everything to me alone, knowing our son's problems. And Jason had taken care of me, only by draining my savings. Is that what you tell yourself? I asked quietly. He stood abruptly. I'm calling Dr. Richards. This delusional behavior needs to be addressed. Go ahead, I said. I saw him yesterday, actually. We had quite an interesting conversation about your concerns for my health. Jason froze, his phone halfway to his ear. What are you talking about? He mentioned you've been very curious about my heart condition, about what might cause a sudden cardiac event, about how certain medications might affect someone my age. The color drained from his face. I was just being thorough. I stood up slowly, my arthritis protesting, but my spine straight. Were you also being thorough when you replaced my heart medication? Or when you added something to my wine? Or when you took out a life insurance policy on me without my knowledge? His eyes widened, then narrowed. You're confused, Mom. Paranoid. This is exactly why you need supervision. Am I? I walked to the cabinet and retrieved the bottle of tampered wine I'd saved. Shall we have this tested? Or perhaps the pills I've been collecting? For a moment, naked panic flashed across his face. Then his expression hardened. Who would believe you? He sneered. A senile old woman against her devoted son? I have documentation of your decline, medical opinions, witnesses who've seen your confusion. I smiled thinly. And I have friends who've been watching you poison me. Fear flickered in his eyes, quickly replaced by contempt. Your imagination is working overtime, Mom. I think you need to rest. He backed toward the door. We'll finish this discussion when you're more rational. After he left, I collapsed into a chair, my heart racing. I texted Eleanor our emergency code. How's the blue scarf knitting pattern coming along? Within minutes, Barbara and Eleanor were at my door. He knows I'm on to him, I told them, still shaking. What now? Barbara's expression was grim. Now we contact the police. It's time to stop playing defense. As they helped me document everything from the confrontation, I felt a strange sense of liberation. For decades, I'd protected Jason from consequences. Now, finally, I was protecting myself. The detective's name was Michael Wilkins, a barrel-chested man with kind eyes and a methodical approach that immediately put me at ease. Mrs. Wilson, he said, reviewing the evidence Barbara had compiled, you've done an impressive job documenting this situation. Most victims don't have this level of evidence. Victims. The word stung, even though I knew it was accurate. What happens now? I asked. We'll open an official investigation, he explained. But I'll be honest, these cases can be challenging to prosecute. The most effective approach would be to catch your son in the act. Barbara leaned forward. Are you suggesting a sting operation? Detective Wilkins nodded. If Mrs. Wilson is willing. All eyes turned to me. Was I willing to face my son directly? To be the bait that would spring the trap? I'll do it, I said, surprising myself with my steady voice. Whatever it takes. The plan was meticulous. The police would install professional recording equipment in my home. I would invite Jason for a final dinner, where I would confront him gradually, drawing out a confession. Officers would be stationed nearby, ready to intervene. Amanda, who had become an unexpected ally, helped prepare me. You'll need to appear vulnerable but lucid enough to get him talking, she advised. Play to his ego. Make him feel superior and in control. The day before the sting, Tyler's monitoring caught something alarming. Jason installing a small device near my water heater. It's designed to cause a gas leak, the police technician confirmed after carefully removing it. Set to activate remotely. The discovery sent a chill through me. My son wasn't just poisoning me slowly, he was preparing a backup plan, a tragic accident that would destroy all evidence along with me. He's getting desperate, Detective Wilkins observed. That's good for us, but it means you need to be extremely careful. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in my living room, surrounded by the ghosts of my life. Henry's recliner, untouched since his death, photo albums chronicling Jason's childhood, the quilt my mother made before I was born. How had it come to this? What had I missed? What could I have done differently? Eleanor stayed with me, keeping watch while I drifted between memories and fears. I failed him, I whispered in the darkness. As a mother. Eleanor's voice was firm. No, Maggie. You loved him too much to let him fail. There's a difference. Morning came with rain that matched my mood. The police arrived early, disguised as utility workers. They installed hidden microphones and cameras, tested the equipment, and gave me a final briefing. Remember, Detective Wilkins said, your goal is to get him to reveal his plan. Don't confront him directly until we give you the signal through this earpiece. Jason arrived at 6 o'clock sharp, carrying an expensive bottle of wine and a small box of chocolates. Special occasion? I asked, taking his coat. Just thought we deserved something nice, he replied, his smile not reaching his eyes. I have good news about the assisted living facility. They have an opening next month. I nodded, pretending excitement while my stomach churned. That's wonderful. I've been thinking a lot about the future lately. As I prepared dinner, Jason opened the wine, carefully pouring a generous glass for me and a smaller one for himself. A toast, he said, raising his glass. To new beginnings. I lifted my glass, mentally rehearsing my lines, feeling the weight of the recording devices, the presence of the police officers outside, and the crushing knowledge that my own son wanted me dead. To new beginnings, I echoed, and took a small sip from the poisoned cup. The wine tasted bitter, but I only pretended to swallow, having practiced this sleight of hand for weeks. Jason watched me intently, his eyes following the movement of my throat. Good? He asked, a strange eagerness in his voice. Lovely, I lied, setting the glass down, though my taste buds aren't what they used to be. Dinner proceeded with strained small talk. Jason kept glancing at my glass, encouraging me to drink more. I complied, pretending to sip while actually emptying small amounts into the napkin on my lap. When he went to the bathroom, Detective Wilkins's voice came through my hidden earpiece. You're doing great, Mrs. Wilson. Start the conversation about family memories when he returns. Jason came back looking slightly more relaxed, having had most of a bottle of wine himself. Perfect. I was looking at old photos yesterday, I said, pushing my food around. Remember that camping trip when you were 10? When your father taught you to fish? A flash of genuine emotion crossed Jason's face. Dad was patient, spent hours showing me how to tie those flies. He loved you so much, I said softly. We both did. Jason's expression hardened. Love wasn't the problem. I tilted my head. What do you mean? Nothing. He refilled my wine glass. Ancient history. I took a breath, following the script we'd rehearsed. You know, I've been thinking about your father lately, about the things he used to say about consequences. Jason stiffened. Dad was big on consequences. He thought it was how people learned, I continued, facing the results of their choices. Is this going somewhere, Mom? His voice had an edge now. I just wonder sometimes if we protected you too much, if I enabled behaviors that hurt you in the long run. Jason laughed harshly. Protected me? That's rich. Dad never let me forget my failures. He wanted you to succeed, I countered. We both did. No, Jason snapped, the alcohol loosening his tongue. You wanted me to be something I'm not. Perfect, like him. Nobody's perfect, Jason. Tell that to him, he sneered. Mr. Moral High Ground. You know what he told me the last time we spoke? That I was a disappointment. That I'd never amount to anything until I faced consequences. The bitterness in his voice was startling. In my earpiece, Detective Wilkins whispered, "Keep him talking about feeling judged." I didn't know he said that, I said truthfully. Of course you didn't, Jason muttered. St. Henry could do no wrong. Meanwhile, I was drowning in debt, fighting addiction, and neither of you would help unless I jumped through your moral hoops. We gave you everything, I said, genuine hurt in my voice. We paid for rehab 3 times. We covered your debts until there was nothing left, and reminded me of it constantly. He slammed his hand on the table. Do you know what it's like to always be the family failure? To know your parents have emergency meetings about what to do with their screw-up son? I stared at him, seeing the wounded child beneath the angry man. Is that why you're doing this? Revenge? His eyes narrowed. Doing what? Poisoning me, taking out life insurance. Planning to sell my house? For a moment, shock paralyzed him. Then he laughed, too loudly. You're confused, Mom. Delusional. Am I? Then why does my wine taste like chemicals? Why have you replaced my heart medication? Why did you install a device to cause a gas leak? The color drained from his face. You don't know what you're talking about. I know about Mick Donovan, I said quietly. I know about the $250,000 you owe him. I know about the fake insurance policy with Guardian Shield. Jason's facade cracked. Rage and panic warred on his face. You've been going through my things? Spying on me? Protecting myself, I corrected. Something I should have done years ago. He stood abruptly, knocking over his chair. You think you're so clever? You're nothing but a burden. A useless old woman taking up space and resources. Is that how you justify murder? I'm your mother, Jason. My mother, he laughed bitterly. My mother died years ago. She was replaced by this pathetic judging shell who thinks she knows best. In my earpiece, Detective Wilkins whispered, almost there. Push him to admit the plan specifically. I looked at my son, my heart breaking. Tell me the truth, Jason. Was this all about the money? Or did you really hate me that much? Something in him snapped. You want the truth? Fine. Yes, I've been poisoning you. Antifreeze in your wine, gradually increasing the dose. Yes, I took out insurance. Yes, I plan to sell this worthless house. Because Mick will kill me if I don't pay him, and it's not like you have much time left anyway. He grabbed the wine bottle. This was supposed to be the final dose, enough to trigger cardiac arrest overnight. No more games, no more waiting. Why not just ask for help? I whispered. Ask? He spat. So you could lecture me again? Judge me? Tell me to face consequences like Dad always did? We never stopped loving you, I said, tears flowing freely now. Love? He laughed bitterly. Your kind of love comes with conditions, with judgment, with strings. The front door burst open. Detective Wilkins entered first, followed by uniformed officers. Jason Wilson, you're under arrest for attempted murder, Wilkins announced. We have everything on tape. As they handcuffed my son, he stared at me with pure hatred. You set me up. I met his gaze steadily. No, Jason. For the first time in your life, I let you face the consequences of your actions. As they led him away, I collapsed into my chair, feeling neither victory nor relief, only a profound, shattering grief for the son I had lost long before tonight. The courtroom fell silent as the judge prepared to announce the sentence. 1 year had passed since that terrible night in my kitchen. 1 year of depositions, evidence hearings, psychiatric evaluations, and grief that cut deeper than any physical wound. Jason sat at the defendant's table, thinner than I'd ever seen him. Rehab in jail had stripped away the bloated puffiness of his addiction, revealing sharp cheekbones that reminded me painfully of Henry. Will the defendant please rise? The judge instructed. I watched my son stand, his shoulders squared, but his eyes downcast. I hadn't spoken to him since his arrest. His letters had gone unanswered, not out of cruelty, but because Barbara advised against contact during the trial. Jason Wilson, this court finds you guilty of attempted murder in the first degree, insurance fraud, and elder abuse. I hereby sentence you to 15 years in state prison with mandatory rehabilitation and psychological treatment. The gavel struck with finality. As they led Jason away, he turned toward me for the first time. Our eyes met across the courtroom, his full of something I couldn't define. Not hatred anymore. Perhaps regret. Perhaps nothing at all. Outside, reporters waited with questions I had no answers for. Barbara skillfully guided me through the crowd to her car. It's over, Margaret, she said gently. You can start healing now. Was it over? Could some wounds ever truly heal? 6 months later, I stood in my garden, pruning roses that had survived the winter. Eleanor sat nearby, watching me with the protective gaze that had become familiar. The blue ones are thriving, she observed. I nodded. My garden had become my therapy, each plant a small affirmation of life continuing. After the trial, I'd thrown myself into creating this space that bloomed even in winter, defying the cold with stubborn color. Amanda called, Eleanor continued. She's bringing the kids this weekend. Another blessing from this ordeal. Reconnection with family. Amanda visited regularly now, her children filling my house with the laughter it had long been missing. Barbara wants to know if you'll speak at the foundation event next month, Eleanor added. The foundation had been my way of creating meaning from tragedy. Using my story to help other elderly victims of financial abuse gave purpose to my pain. We'd already helped 3 women escape similar situations. I'll speak, I said, surprised by the strength in my voice. It's important. My New England trip, the one I'd dreamed of for decades, had finally happened last fall. I'd scattered some of Henry's ashes along the rocky coastline, fulfilling a promise made long ago. The rest remained with me, a connection to the man who had tried to warn me, to protect me, even beyond death. Inside, my house felt different now. Security systems Tyler had installed remained, but they no longer represented fear, just prudence. The cameras were gone, the hidden microphones removed. This was my sanctuary again. That evening, a letter arrived from the state correctional facility. Jason's handwriting on the envelope. Unlike the others, I opened this one. "Dear Mom," it began, the handwriting steadier than it had been in years. 8 months sober now. The prison therapist says I should write even if you never respond. I don't expect forgiveness. I'm only beginning to understand what I did to you. Dad was right. I needed consequences. Each day of sobriety brings more clarity about the monster I became. I'm facing the truth about myself, as he always said I should. Tears blurred my vision as I continued reading. Not tears of reconciliation, that might never come, but of recognition. For the first time, Jason was seeing himself clearly. It was the beginning of something, though I didn't know what. Later, I sat at my desk with the new journal I'd started after the trial. Not a record of fear and betrayal, but a testament to survival, to transformation, to the woman who emerged from trauma stronger than before. On the final page, I wrote, "Sometimes we must lose almost everything to discover our true strength. I am not just a survivor, I am the author of my own story. And though some chapters have been darker than I could have imagined, I am still writing, still growing, still blooming, even in winter." Outside, snow began to fall, dusting my winter roses with white. I watched them bend, but not break under its weight. Nature's perfect metaphor. I closed the journal and looked at Henry's photograph beside me. "You were right," I whispered. "About consequences, about strength, about everything." The bitter truth had nearly killed me, but in the end, it had set me free. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.